Have you ever wanted the opportunity to sit down with a homeschool mom who's been at it for a while and just ask questions, soak things in that she says, and just kind of find out some things about especially her early years of homeschooling, and if she was to go back, how she would do things differently? Today I'm going to share with you 5 regrets I have from my 10 years of homeschooling. Before we get started, I'm Leigh from Little by Little Homeschool. If you're new here, I would love it if you hit that subscribe button. I'm thankful that you're here to watch this video. But over here at Little by Little Homeschool, I share just tips and tricks. I share our story of how we homeschool, things about curriculum, and just really the nitty-gritty, the inside truth of homeschooling. I'm really glad you're here. Let's get started on today's video. Now, if you're new to homeschooling or maybe even thinking about homeschooling, I want to let you know that I have an entire program that involves coaching that walks you through step by step on how to get started in homeschooling. I cut out all the fluff, all the Google searches that lead you to roads that just get you even more confused. If you'd like more information about that, go ahead and tap the link below so that maybe you and I can chat and I can kind of hear about what your homeschooling goals and your plans are. I'd love to walk alongside you. But right now, let's get started on today's video. My 5 regrets from 10 years of homeschooling. Before I get started on my list, I really wanted to kind of give a disclaimer. I understand that when we do things, we really learn from them. They can be learning experiences, especially if they don't go quite well. So I do want to preface this with the fact that I understand that these 5 regrets that I have really have made me the homeschool mom that I am today. So I share these maybe in hopes that you can recognize them, and if there are things that you don't want to continue on the path, that maybe you can kind of break that cycle, break that path that you're on a little bit sooner than me. So really my heart behind sharing this is wanting to share my experience and what I kind of went through and where I have gotten to now, in hopes that just it encourages you or blesses you. If you have been homeschooling for a while, I'd love it if you drop in the comment section below some of maybe the regrets, or even just a number 1 or just one of the regrets that you have from your years of homeschooling. Because every list starts with a number 1, this isn't necessarily, these are in no particular order. They're just 5 different things that I have come to realize that, again, even though it led me to where I am now as a homeschool mom, I look back now and I kind of wish that I had done things differently or not done these things at all. So these are in no particular order. But, so let's start with number 1 in no particular order is I regret following the public school schedule. Now, I went to public school and my kids were enrolled in public school. My oldest went through 2nd grade. However, I had the mindset of that school, at least here in the United States, starts, end of August, beginning of September, and goes until June. We take the traditional holidays off, and that's like the best model. What I found was that pretty much every single February for 5 years, I was burned out. I was a frazzled homeschool mom and couldn't quite figure out why was I always burned out. So really that's the heart and the reason behind not wanting to follow the public school schedule, was because I was getting burned out. Once I stepped away from that, and I'll tell you in a moment what I did and why, I realized that I could be the master of our homeschool schedule. I didn't have to do what everybody else was doing. I didn't have to do what neighbors were doing, other family was doing as far as their public school, schedule. Because of the homeschool lifestyle being all in one. I mean, I'm mom, I'm teacher, and all of those things. I really don't get a break. So the public school calendar schedule may work really well for some. It may work really well for the teachers because you get to compartmentalize. You get to then leave that and go home. And even though you have kids at home, it just is a different role, a different situation, a different setting that you have. I found that by day in and day out, starting in September until like February, I would be burned out. I mean, I continued through, I pushed through, but from February until about April or maybe May, when the weather started to warm up, I would kind of perk up a little bit. But I just found that I was burned out. I was not a very fun homeschool mom. I didn't even like being around myself. So what did I do to rectify this situation? After 5 years, we moved states. I used this as an opportunity because we had no family, no friends where we were going, and I didn't feel like I had to keep up with anybody else's schedule or go along with other things, that I could just make my own schedule. So when we moved, it was the perfect opportunity to try something that I had been wanting to do. And we moved to a more year-round homeschool schedule. I did a 6 weeks on of school and then would take 1 week off. Now, some of those weeks that we would take off would be over Thanksgiving and Christmas. I could time things. It did mean that I had to start school early earlier in August, but my goal was always to be done by the end of May. Memorial Day weekend would kind of be my goal. The state that we were living in, May was a beautiful month, so we would push like really hard through the winter to get our stuff done, so that come May we were a bit more open. Where we live now, June is a really great month, and so my goal still is to be done by around Memorial Day, or maybe go a week or two after that. But by moving to a more year-round homeschool schedule, it really allowed me to get the breaks I needed. My kids didn't necessarily need the breaks because they didn't have all the responsibilities that I have. Now that they're older, they appreciate them. But having that week off energized me, it filled me up and gave me what I needed to keep going for another 6 weeks. So the number one thing that I regret doing was in the beginning, and so maybe even I shouldn't say from the beginning, I mean, if that's really all I knew. But I wish that I had switched to a more year-round earlier instead of pushing through for 5 years and finding myself just completely frazzled and burned out every February. My second regret from homeschooling is pushing my kids to read before they were ready. I did not realize at the time that the average age of kids learning to read is between the ages of 6 and 10. Now that's average. That means you could have a 3 or 4-year-old, but it also means you could have a 12 or 13-year-old. So my regret is pushing a kid and to feel like he was late and behind because he wasn't reading like I thought that he was. I was comparing my child, my individual child who is different than all other kids, to a system that has a need to manage a lot of children at one time when I didn't have to do that. I only had one child that I was teaching how to read. So my regret is all of the time that I worried and that I was anxious over and was concerned about. Now, I do want to say that, you know, that did have a good outcome. It did help me to focus more on what he needed. So there was a good outcome to it, but I just wish that I could go back and not worry so much. I also wish that I could go back and not try to hammer in the reading so much, to give him time to really come to where things started to click in his own time. Now, I am very thankful that reading did click. He was just a little bit of a late reader, but not late at all, just on, you know, on that average age span. So I regret overemphasizing that in my own mind. Instead of focusing on the things that he was learning and the areas that he was excelling and the subjects that he was growing really well in, I regret, you know, just hyper focusing on the one instead of focusing on what he was doing and understanding that he has his own, you know, growth curve, that he's going to be okay, that he is going to read, that one-on-one teacher-student ratio will lead to a child that does read. So I do regret just that extra burden that I placed upon myself that I really did not have to put on myself at all. My third regret in my early years of homeschooling is sticking with curriculum just because I bought it, even though it wasn't working. I can think back now, and I'm not going to tell you what the names of those curriculums were. It just, because it works, it might work great for some families, but it just did not work for my family, my kids' personalities, my teaching style, their learning style. So I do regret just kind of pushing through and keeping up with those kinds of things. Now, I do think that part of the reason why I did that was because we were on such a tight budget. We didn't have extra money for a lot of different things. If something wasn't working, I had to figure out some other way of possibly doing it free. The great thing now when I started homeschooling, there was not like Facebook Marketplace. There weren't these different websites where you could sell used curriculum. What I had was what I have. But I kind of look back now and wish that I had just ditched it, found something free online, or found nothing at all and just kind of come up with my own, but I just kind of lack the confidence. So I regret not being a little bit more relaxed and loose with my plans and just understanding that things can pivot. Now, if any of these things are things that you're seeing in your home and you'd like a readjustment with those things, my coaching program can help you with that. I walk through all these things, the different mindset shifts that you need. We'll talk about exactly curriculum that'll work for your family, how to order your days. So if you're interested in that, go ahead and click that link down in the description below. So now let's talk about the fourth thing that I regret from my early years of homeschooling, and that is busy work. Just for the sake of doing worksheets, we would do worksheets. Again, this was a mindset shift for homeschooling that I had not quite gotten over. I have gotten over it now, thankfully. But instead of just looking at a map of the United States and talk about it and maybe read some books about some different states, I would hammer in worksheets. Maybe we'd read something and I'd have them fill out worksheets. Instead of making things more conversational, I would have them constantly filling out worksheets just for busy work and just so that I could show to myself and maybe prove to somebody else. Now, at the time, I was living in a state that I did have to provide because their standards of knowing whether or not you are accomplishing anything was to see some type of worksheet, some type of busy work. I did start to let go of this after a few years, and we would just formally make sure that we would, don't tell them, we would do some of the worksheets just to have proof, because they just didn't recognize that a verbal conversation, just, pulling out a map, putting it on the floor, taking a look at it and talking through, different states and geography and all those things, it wasn't something tangible. So I regret all the busy work, all the extra workbooks that I would have my kids do, just a stack of them, just so that I could feel like I had some type of measurement. Instead of sitting back and actually looking at what they have accomplished, how they are doing, and using that as a sort of measurement instead of just filling out paperwork. So I would say busy work would be the fourth thing that I regret from my early years of homeschooling. If you're feeling like you have a lot of busy work, go ahead. I give you permission to put aside some of those extra workbooks and then find out if you miss them. Maybe you will miss them and want to add some in, but maybe if you don't miss them, it's actually an okay thing. The fifth thing that I regret from my 10 years of homeschooling is prioritizing our curriculum and checking off boxes over relationships. This ties into the 4 other ones, specifically a couple of them more than others, but really focusing on, getting things checked off. We have to get this worksheet done today. We have to get this. We have to have, these certain markers of success over relationships. There were tears over math, and sometimes there's gonna be tears anyway, no matter what you do, no matter how much of a gentle approach you take. Some kids might just get upset. I don't know what it is about math, but I regret putting way too much emphasis on checking off boxes, pushing through a curriculum over relationships. I wish that I could go back now, and those days that we were having a rough time, I wish that I could just go back and have a do-over and say, you know what, forget this. Let's grab a book, go outside, and just read. That doesn't mean that I didn't do those at times, but I regret the mental state, the mindset that I was in at the time that focused more on getting things done. Again, this was because the only thing that I knew was the public school system, and I thought that that was successful, and I thought that that was really the only way to have success in education and to learn how to do things, and that is why I put an emphasis upon that. And that might work in a room full of 30 kids and with one teacher, but when it's at home, I don't need to put curriculum and checking off boxes and getting all those things done over the relationship with my kids. So I do regret putting more of an emphasis on curriculum as opposed to just having fun days together. There you have it, my 5 biggest regrets from my 10 years of homeschooling. The first being that I regret following the public school calendar and not just making up my own schedule. Second one being just too worried about a child reading late and not understanding that they're just on their own reading curve and that they will come to it, putting such an emphasis upon reading and following a curriculum. Which leads me into the third regret, and that was sticking with curriculum even though it was obviously not working for my family. The fourth was just adding busy work, just lots of worksheets, lots of things just to prove to myself and possibly to others that I was actually educating my child. And the fifth regret I have was prioritizing checking off boxes over relationships with my kids. And as I say in the beginning, all of these things has brought me to the place that I am now as a homeschool mom. So I regret these things. I wish I had done them differently. However, they have made me who I am. They have helped shape who my kids are. It has helped shape what our homeschool is like now with teenagers. These are 5 things that I have worked through. If you recognize that any of these areas are ones that in your homeschool you need to work on, I encourage you to do so. See how you can adjust. If you're really feeling overwhelmed by it, or if you're just starting to homeschool and you're like, I have no idea how to even get started, let me know. I'd love to walk alongside you, get you into my coaching program so that we can chat more and get you up and running and feeling confident in no time. Thanks for watching this video. If you haven't already, hit that subscribe button and we'll see you next time.